Um, Speakers and chair. So this was the topic of my undergraduate dissertation. So it was the relationship between art and medicine in the Renaissance period. So it was a bit longer than this, but I've tried to cut it down and describe it without pictures. So for people who don't know, the Renaissance was in Europe. Was between roughly the 15th and the 17th centuries. And in this time, both artistic and medical practices saw unprecedented waves of advancements. And it led to the physician Andreas Vesalius to be the first scholar to recognise the potential between a collaboration between art and medicine through anatomists and anatomically familiar artists. Throughout the Renaissance, this idea gained traction with artists and physicians such as Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, William Harvey, and Paracelsus contributing to it, and the result had profound effects on medicine and art at the time. One of the best examples of the effects of anatomically educated artists was the depictions of the biblical story of Judith the Head and Holofernes. So it's a Catholic and East Orthodox version of the Old Testament. It was painted by Caravaggio in 1599 and Artemisia again in 1620. But in this 21-year period, her version of the beheading was much more anatomically correct. And in that period, getting ahead of myself, right. So it was more anatomically correct because Judith's muscles were straining and the parabola of the blood spurt from the sever in the neck. And it was due to Artemisia's friendship with Galileo, who'd studied blood spurts when arteries were severed and found that they went in like an arc parabola. So she implemented that. So that kind of exchange was really important because her version might not even have existed or been as anatomically correct as it was because of the interaction between art and science. But it wasn't uncommon for artists to observe or perform their own dissections to gain a better understanding of the human form. So Michelangelo and Da Vinci were renowned for this. Da Vinci created about 800 observational sketches that we know of. Michelangelo created less, but he implemented what he learned directly into his art instead. An example of that is his statue of Moses, where on the back of his forearm there's a small muscle that's only visible when it contracts, like when you lift your pinky. But you can only really see it if you're jacked, I can't really do it. But, so yeah, and Moses is lifting his pinky, and so you can see it. But Michelangelo wouldn't have even known about that if it hadn't been for the dissections that he performed. The period also benefited from developments from the printing press, which was invented in 1440, but by 1600 over 150 million books were in circulation, and they were often printed in the vernacular rather than Latin, which made them much more accessible and more people could read them. This technology led to anatomical drawings in these texts to be disseminated much faster. And it meant that other researchers could build on the existing knowledge. For example, I previously mentioned Andreas Vesalius. He wrote a text in Belgium and made a sketch of the human venous system, which then provided the basis for William Harvey in England to discover the one-way valves that are in human veins that allow the blood to only flow in one direction. So phlebotomy charts were also disseminated across Europe, which detail which veins correlated to which illnesses, because bleeding was a common treatment to get rid of bad blood, which people thought caused disease. But it was often performed by people without any formal medical training, so they kind of learned through experience, which is good if you're really experienced, but for the people who weren't, it was often quite dangerous. So it was made a little bit safer because there was an annotation on the neck just warning you that there was an artery there. European literacy rates were really low to non-existent, so Renaissance books often in the later stages included pictures of the different plants and things, which aided people in gathering regardless of if they could read, which just extended the reach and kind of leveled the divide between rich and poor and the medical treatments that they could do. So the progress made in the worlds of art and medicine were really closely linked, and they contributed to each other's progress throughout the Renaissance. And that's all I have. Thank you.